19-year-old.
Modernism was
very glad to be in Los Angeles right now as an art maker, as an artist.
Tell me about how you both started working together on the Felt Mistress work.
I mean, I'd always made stuff for people, birthday presents, because I think as well is I was surrounded by artists. Everybody was a comic book artist or an illustrator, or all my friends. And I went to art college as well, so everybody was doing something creative, and I was doing. I mean, obviously, I was making dresses as a designer, so I was doing a creative job. But so I wanted to make them presents. That I couldn't draw them a picture for the birthday. They'd give me a beautiful painting. I couldn't do that, so I would make them one of their characters up in something. And so that was just. But you think there's no business in this. This is just me doing something nice for a friend, and that's it. And then Jonathan started to do some work for a clothing company, and he designed some creatures that were going to be printed on all over t-shirts,
all over print
and
on
things.
a hoodie, yeah.
And I said to Jonathan, I could make one of those guys, and so I made one, I think, and then the clothing company thought it would be a great idea to have them on the stand at the trade show, because it would help decorate the stand and it would look, so I made a few of those. And then we thought we'd take them into a shop, see if we could sell them, because I thought, I could make these and sell them in a shop. It'd be really quite nice to do, in my spare time. And so I did that, and it was really weird because I didn't really feel as though I could price that type of work. I mean, I was charging thousands for wedding dresses, but I couldn't charge for this. I didn't know what this was worth because it was just me, as a hobby, perhaps messing around, and I didn't really know what I could do with it. But then I think other artists saw. I think Jonathan met John Bergerman at the same trade show, and you got talking, and we'd been friends on Flickr, and he'd seen my work. I think then we met up with him a couple of times after that, and he had a show coming up in London, and so he said, "Would you want to make some of my characters?" And that was the first time I'd actually not worked with Jonathan, where I'd worked with somebody who sends me a plan or sends me a flat image. There's no arguing with obviously somebody else. I can't say, I don't like the way you've done the hair, we're going to have to change this, I have to, they get what they want, whereas we can a bit more back and forth. And so obviously working with John, because he was a name as well, got more attention for me, and just sort of snowballed really. And then I how many months did you say it was from going in the shop to
I think it was 2 years from taking toys into a shop in Chester and selling them for £20 to having our own window on Oxford
and the Wardroom in Selfridges. So it did really. I mean, it's.
But it was real odd.
Yeah, it's hard because I think that it happened really quickly. But I've been sewing all my life and producing stuff all my life. It's just that it's just been sitting at home or sitting on people's shelves. So it's not there's no sort of quick way. I mean, it was quite a long way to get here. I mean, it's not as if But it did happen quick, and then it sort of took over the wedding dresses, and I was thinking, this is going to be great, I can actually do this. And we got a couple of jobs from Sweden, ad campaigns, and just sort of, and there's not many people that actually produce, I'm quite lucky that I think there's a few people that do produce 3D pieces, but not a great deal. It's not sort of like crazy amounts. So.
They're fairly unique, really.
Yeah, because but I've sort of I was adamant that when I started, again, back to being really selfish, I was adamant that I wanted to do, when I wanted to make a living, I wanted to do something I really wanted to do. And so because I enjoyed the process, I didn't want to do anything that would make perhaps make it a little bit easier to produce something, but then take out the middle section, the actual bit that I found enjoyable. And I prefer the sewing and the flat pattern cutting, because I know a few people ask me whether I use computer software to make the shapes of 3D. I mean, I don't understand anything about computers, but I take it that there's programs that you can get that'll show you how to make a 3D shape if you program stuff in. I take it there's that sort of thing exists. Yeah. But I don't use anything like that. I want to be able to construct it from a flat piece of paper to work out how the darts and what dart manipulation I need to make the 3D shape, because I find that bit fascinating. And again with the actual sewing, I mean, people say you could glue all that on and it wouldn't look any different as a finished article. But it's like, yeah, but there wouldn't have been that section of me actually putting those stitches in, which is the bit that I really love, to get to that stage. So obviously it would look the same and people would be happy with it, but it would spoil it for me, and I want it to be, you know, about me when I'm producing it, and not about, you know, the end product that's finished and done. So
it's interesting because the way that you talk about working on it is much more it is much more similar to how you know, a sort of contemporary visual artist would work on a piece, rather than it being a kind of, you know, a more for sort of commercial thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because the way that you talk about it, you obviously putting a lot of yourself into it and into the manufacturing process.
Well, when we've done, like, we did a campaign for a milk company in Sweden, and we had to. They were going to take a picture of. They were going to set up the scene with the 3D figures. Jonathan had done some 2D artwork, and it was going to be set out. They were going to take a photograph of it, and then the photograph was going to be used on milk vending machines in Swedish schools. So the photograph was the end product. Nobody was seeing the individual pieces. We had a limited time again, like we talk about deadlines. We still had quite a short time. I think we were in Japan when the job came in, so it was, you know, it was our own fault because there was a certain amount of time that we couldn't start the job until we got home. But everything was still hand sewn and produced, whereas I didn't need the photograph would have looked exactly the same if I'd have glued the details on. Nobody would have been, because nobody was getting to pick them up. But the actual, if I was going to do the work, I wanted it to still be enjoyable to do. And so, you know, that type of thing, it seems a little bit crazy, because obviously if it's in a gallery show, people can come up to it and look, and they can tell the difference, and they can see the stitches, and they can feel, you know. Whereas when it's something for a commercial job, that most of it might have even been, you know, photoshopped a bit, or, you know, it just seems that you don't really need to do that side of it, but it is still important to me. Otherwise I'm just doing not the job that I set out to do, you know, when I decided that I'm doing this for a living. You know, so
Jonathan, tell me a bit about your part in the collaborative process with Louise and working on these characters.
It changes quite a lot. The first pieces we did, or the first things I think of as proper Felt Mistress pieces, I've been watching repeats on BBC Parliament channel of the elections from 1982. So they were just showing the BBC election broadcast from 1982. And everyone was in really horrible, you know, sort of shiny suits and big kipper ties. And I just started drawing these monsters that were dressed like these politicians. Quite finished drawings. And Louise saw them and said, oh, I could make him. And she made like a perfect reproduction of one of these characters, right down to his suit being lined.
You even had underwear on, which is another way where I go a little bit anal about it, because I think that it needs to be, you know, how a person would dress. You know, when it.
So those are the ones we did where Louise copied what I did exactly. But whereas now when we're working on things, perhaps I'll produce a lot of work in a sketchbook. There'll be a lot of drawings. Sometimes Louise will take things out of the bin and say, "Oh, what's this?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't really think it. No, I think we could do something with him." Or so it changes, and it's completely different to how Louise works with other artists when they send her. Some artists send her a turnaround, so she knows exactly what it's going to look like from every angle. Whereas when we work together, or Louise, you know, we've walked around, you know, we've been in town before now, and we've spotted somebody, and we've both nudged each other.
Again, that's the other joy about living in Wrexham, because we have our fair share of characters, and so there's these little, you know, eccentric people walking around that we just think, oh my goodness, like that, you know, they would just, like, how they'd put their clothes together, that would be great to do.
So I might well even see my dad popping up.
Well,
that might have been your dad.
Yeah, we might have actually seen his dad. Yeah, but it's important for me, like, to, again, I think it's coming from the fashion background. Like, people were saying, how do you know so much about a character? You know, because we have these little bios for them all and their backstories, and they all interlock. And people were saying, you know, how do you know so much about them? And I was saying, well, when Jonathan's drawing them or we're talking about them, like, I have to know what music they listen to, you know, like what they like, what they eat, what they do, where they hang out, because otherwise how would I know what to dress them in? Because I think there's a really important relationship between people's clothing and you know, what tribe they want to belong to. And so, you know, it's not just a case of thinking, I mean, I don't understand people's idea of how would I know what for them to wear if we didn't know what they liked, because obviously there's a type of there's a type of jeans that they're going to wear if they're into a certain type of music, or they're a certain age, or
So the process of creating the characters is, in fact, to me it seems very similar to what an author who is writing a novel where the characters are very much
I mean, we had to sort of slow it down a bit, because I know, Jonathan, we were writing almost like essays about, or you were writing almost essays about the type of interest that this, what his history was, where he was schooled. He's just getting to a point where he was getting a bit, I think, and just from time alone, we were spending, like Jonathan I'd made it, then we were doing these, that the whole process of this one item was getting to be like too long, so we've shortened it a little bit and just clipped it as far as a couple of likes and dislikes, just so that we get an idea of it, and depending on.
And sometimes in the past, like I've written down, we've got a character that I just wrote Kenneth Tynan, because I thought, how could we create somebody who's a bit like Kenneth Tynan? Or we've got two that were a bit like Siskel and Ebert, the film critics. So sometimes it's just somebody will pop up on TV and I'll think, oh right, there's a way we can replicate these people. I don't think you'd ever see it in the finished one, but that's the first spot. Yeah,
because I think people expect them to look like, but not necessarily. It's just it's what's triggered it in the first place. But going back to when I'm working with somebody else, I don't like to have, once somebody's handed over the sketch to me of what they want, I'd have a look at it, and then I might ring them up just to clarify a few things if I didn't understand. But I never show work in progress shots, because if they've handed it to me, it's then my bit. I know it's still there, it's my bit, so I finish it and then they like it, and then if they don't like it, then because I don't want to be work for hire where you're going to produce this exactly like I want it to be. I mean, it's a collaboration, and they've designed the character, but I still want it to work 3D in the way that I think it should work. So
I think it's interesting when
I'm lucky that they accept that. But
with John Bergman, when John Bergman started working with Louise, the characters he was sending were his ones where they were a black outline, colour, and he did turnarounds of each one. Now John occasionally has done some stuff with watercolour and inks, which is a lot more fluid, and he sent Louise a scan and he circled it and said, this.
So it's an element of a painting, as opposed to even being a character. I mean, obviously you can see that there's an eye in there and that there's an arm. Sometimes we don't want it to have an obvious face. I think one of the other people, I think the burger I did with him, he didn't want it to have an obvious face. But I think that comes with working with somebody a lot. So you get used to it, and then obviously there's a trusting then, and he thinks, oh, I'd love to see what she's going to do with this. But I'm quite lucky. Again, it's because I'm so selfish in the fact that I want to do it my way. I'm lucky that I've worked on a commercial that they've let me do that as well. That the commercial work has been where they've left us to our own advice. There's a few little requirements that it needs to do, to fit the brief, but on the whole it's not back and forth, and can you change it, can you make their arms a bit longer, can you do this, which then loses all interest in the vision that you had to start with. So we're quite lucky that we don't have to bend too much, do we?
No.
How did George Harrison come about?
Well, Gary Nucleus were doing the Beatles show, which I've worked with before, and like Jonathan's a huge Beatles fan, so when we got the email about doing the Beatles, we were just like, this is going to be great, we can do the whole of them, we can go Yellow Submarine, we can go all trippy, we can do, we'll make the whole of them and we'll make the scene and stuff. And then we were realising that we didn't really have a lot of time to do all this, and I think because we were so close to the subject, because it's Jonathan's such a big fan.
It's my sort of default setting. I draw the Beatles. I'll either draw Spider-Man or the Beatles when I'm not thinking about it. It's one of those things I can doodle, and I've drawn, when I was a child I could draw John Lennon, and when we used to go on holiday to Spain I used to draw drawings of John Lennon in return for free drinks.
Free squash.
Free chocolate milk.
But I think it got to a point where we were like, well, which one do we do? We've got to do them all. Which period do we do of the Beatles? Because it's like they're all really cool, and I'm big with facial hair, so it's like, oh, we could have one where they've got loads of facial hair. I don't want them to because there's more for me to get involved in. And we went into we almost rang them up and said, we can't do this because it's just too, we just can't make any decision, can we?
And we had 2 weeks, I think?
Yeah, so it was getting to be a bit stressful.
Before we had to post it.
And then we just thought, we don't have to make all four. We don't really, do we? Why are we worrying about this? And so, George is obviously the best one, so yeah. So that was
why George,
great.
Then?
Again, I think it's because you've done a few little. I'm trying to work out. Sorry, I'm looking around because I had some like really crazy sketches, but I'm not sure whether I got them. I could show you, but I think you've just drawn them in about 3 or 4 lines.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, because I'm really obsessed with making musical instruments, pipes, and trainers are the 3 things that I really love to put. You can go to town on the detail. And so when Jonathan started talking about George Harrison, he'd done that drawing, we were like, yeah, we can give him a sitar, it'll be really amazing, and I can make the instrument, which will make me feel less of a cop-out for not doing all 4 members and just doing one. And so I think then it just, it just seemed to be...
Yeah, it just came
it
together.
It just happened, really. But it was...
And also, as well, I think when we're trying to choose colours, we're trying to keep a limited palette, as we try and do with most stuff.
Yeah.
And is it Lagoon, that blue we use a lot? When we saw that Lagoon, it just felt right for George, and it was like Krishna or...
Yeah. Because I don't like to do, I don't want to be doing real, skin tones or anything like that. I'm not interested. I mean, I get commissioned to do portraits of people as well, but we'll always do our version of them. And we never do skin. I mean, they're either blue or red, or they never, not going to interested in looking at all these different skin tones, because how on earth would you, that's just, it's not how we work. So.
And Jonathan, you were just saying earlier about how you are able to do more of your own creative work these days,
yes,
as well as the work that you do that is commissioned.
Yeah.
Tell me where that work is going. Tell me what type of work you're now doing.
I think a lot of it's, again, this trade show where we had the first sort of Felt Mistress creatures on display. They'd asked me, could you just do some live drawing while you're here? And it was one of those things I'd never normally just draw straight on in ink. I'd pencil it, or I'd think about it or sketch it. And I remember they had like a snowboard there, and I started drawing on it. And I thought, actually, I can do this, and this is quite enjoyable, just making it up on the hoof. So after we went to that, I started attending like a live drawing event, and I've done ones now in Manchester, and there's a regular one in Chester that we go to a lot. But that was really freeing as well, starting on a big board with a permanent marker. And if I made a mistake, I'd have to just incorporate that into the work. So that was a completely different way of working for me as well. And it was a way of improvising on the spot. And I know now if I do a painting or if I do something for an exhibition, I will sort of have a rough plan, and I'll sketch out shapes. But I like to leave a lot so I can improvise on the piece while I'm working on it as well. And I think that's come from just a live drawing experience. And I would never have really before, if somebody had asked me to do that previous to when I could have, at this trade show, I probably wouldn't have done it, or I'd have had to have gone in with a plan, but I do like improvising as well.
To what extent does the working on the externalizing of your ideas, the producing of your work, to what extent is that part of the thinking process?
I suppose I've got a problem sometimes when I'm thinking of a piece. Sometimes I'll think about things I've done in the past, and I thought, God, I thought that was good then, and I look at it now and it looks awful. So what do I know? And when I'm thinking about what something's going to be like, somebody can visualise something and think this is what I'm working towards. I've got a habit of thinking what something's going to look like, and it's awful. I'm thinking, before I've even started a piece, I thought, I know what this is going to be like, and this one's for the bin. This is dreadful. So I need to actually put pen to paper to try and work this out. I've got something in my head I'm working towards, but I have to sort of exercise these bad drawings by putting pen to paper. So there's something about the contact as well. That's why I don't like working digitally as much as I do with real materials, because when watercolour or ink is sort of fighting back and it's doing what it wants to do, it's a lot more interesting than just being able to press Control Z or...
So there's an element of indeterminacy or chance that comes from the materials.
Yes, and I like that, and I didn't realise I did until sort of the last 4 or 5 years, I think.
I think that's the difficult thing about working with computers, is that, I have interviewed artists in the series about how glitches on computers have actually contributed to their work, but there is a level of predictability, I think, with computers that you don't get when you work.
It's just that deleting, that being able to just say, I don't like that, I'm undoing it, that undo thing. Because both of us, it's really funny, because I've finished pieces ready for a show, and they've been normally sitting downstairs on the top of the sideboard ready to get packed away. And I've, just before I've gone to bed, I've wanted to take scissors to them and to cut them into bits because I absolutely hate them. I've probably been working too long on them, and I think they're rubbish. The proportions are wrong. I'm going to have to I just want to take a pair of scissors to them or start undoing them and that. And then I go to bed, and then I wake up in the morning, and then it's like a completely different outlook. But I was thinking, like, if I could have just pressed undo, they wouldn't be sitting there now, would they? And then it would be constantly, redoing and then deleting and redoing and deleting, whereas you don't have that option. And I think that's probably a good thing. You've got time to step away, go back and have a look, and then think. Or, like you said, some of the accidents that happened that you oh my god, that's happened, sometimes is really has helped the piece along the way.
Yeah.
But I don't I don't trust myself. I would have just deleted the whole file and then gone to bed and then woke up and thought, oh, I've got 2 days to finish something. I don't know how, it's a weird one.
Because how does that work with you collaborating on a character where, for instance, where Jonathan has created a visual of a character,
Yeah.
and you're then, because really what you're trying to do is translate that into much more, what's the word, badly behaved material, I think.
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, recently, there's never been, I think, except for the very first, there's never been a completely finished drawing of that's how it's got to look.
No.
I think partly because Jonathan thought this is pointless because she's going to argue with me along the way, that doesn't really exist anymore, so it's a little bit more organic in the process. Like sometimes we don't even know what the face is going to look like, and we sort of mess around and things. So it doesn't really, it's hard. It's not like I think, how am I going to recreate this? And also, we've been together a long time, and even though Jonathan doesn't sew, he's seen enough of my work to understand, and he might say, that technique you do where that thing does this, and, can you not use some of that and do that? And comes up with ideas that I might not have thought of. So I think both of us know each other's work so well that even though we couldn't do each other's job, we know what's possible to be able to explain. Can you just draw this for me? I know you do those faces, well, can you just draw that so I can visualize how it's going to look on here? So yeah, but and again, it's all to do with, it's just knowing the fabrics, isn't it? The same way as it is for any artist, is just what they can do and what they can't do. And
I suppose when you were making wedding dresses, every bride who walked through the door was a completely different shape as well.
Yeah, I was saying this is another key thing I think about producing 3D stuff, is people were saying, oh, you've got that brain where you scan something and you know what it's going to look like. And when I was making wedding dresses, I only dealt with like one-off, so every person came in had to have a dress to fit them. So no matter what shape they were, I had to make a paper pattern or a piece of like flat fabric, fold up and fit their body shape. So I know if somebody's got a big bust, small waist, what the paper pattern is going to look like. And so it's really, I just look at something. I'm sorry, I'm pointing over there. It's probably not on camera, but there's a guy sitting there. And I just use that thing, like if I was going to, I remember covering a chair and somebody said, well, you've never done upholstery. And I was like, yeah, but I just imagined that the chair was a bride and that I needed to make something that would cover it. So I can cover the fabric to that shape because I've done it so often with, all different types of body shapes. So I think that it helped to know where you had to release fabric, take fabric in to make the curve that you wanted to. And so it's just a series of, boobs, bums, and waist shaping that's just all put together to work that way. I don't overthink. It's hard to explain it. I think it's just how my brain's been worked and how it's been trained to work.
Some of the characters must have an armature of some kind inside them.
Yeah. I more so now because when I was doing more stuff that needed to be filmed and they needed to do certain things, like we did some stuff that recently had to be animated, and so there's obviously things that had to be done, and so and then there's things where I've wanted them to be able to pose with cigarettes, so to wire their fingers. You can stitch them all down, but then I think that they don't want to, I don't want them to smoke all day. They want to put the cigarette down at some point. So, you need to be able to undo their fingers. So it's more to do with not having anything too structured. But on the whole, it tends to be arms, fingers. Bodies don't tend to have much. Occasionally they'll have, hips if they need to do a certain...
But that's an interesting thing about working with our other artists as well.
Yeah.
It's like when because Louise has just done some work with for a film called American Interior, which is a documentary made by Griff Rhys out of the Super Furry Animals. and the character she had to make had to be how tall was John Evans?
Well, they wanted to be able to take him around with them and sit him in the car because, you know, it is about an explorer, and I think it was 1790 or something like that, and obviously no photographs exist, so Pete Fowler had designed this character, and they wanted to take something that represented this character around as he was doing the exploring, the journey that this guy had taken. And so they were saying it'd be great if you could do something that would sit in a car with him, and I think they were thinking about something that was perhaps so big that they could sit on the passenger seat. And then I said, look, I work big, and you can have him, not perhaps full size because that's awkward to carry around, but I think he was like
about
4 foot, perhaps 4 foot tall. But then just by the very nature, because I knew they were going to want to film him next to something, he needed to have a bit more structure to him so that he would stand, because eventually if you're using just stuffing, they get a little bit soft and a little bit like a well-loved teddy bear, so you don't really want them to be quite so floppy after 9 months of filming or whatever. So yeah, that was different, because I had to sort of think a little bit more about, he's got to be not just stuck on a plinth in a gallery and then somebody takes him home and displays him in the glass cabinet. He's going to actually do some travelling and see the world a bit, so he needs to be a little bit more structured.
Because he would stand on his own as well.
Yeah, he would stand on his own. So, and that's quite interesting for me to see. It was quite great talking to the people, talking to the director, saying how people interacted with him as well. They were visiting all these places and explaining and sitting him on the side of a bar, and they were saying that the guy behind the bar would just suddenly start interacting with, they obviously explained what they were doing, and but they were just saying it's really great to see people obviously.
So because that had gone from being, I think they were going to have something which would hang from the rearview mirror, to being like a 4 foot recreation of this character.
Yeah, but that was great fun, and yeah, I think the film's out in spring, so I'm really interested to see that, because he's got a bit more of a life.
Yeah, we posted him off here in a box, and then he came back for some repairs about 6 months later with bits of grass from
bits of twigs from
bit of swamp juice on his feet.
Yeah.